3 men attacked the mafia boss. He fell, but the waitress caught his gun and... The rain in San Aurelio did not just fall, it attacked. It was a hard, driving Southern California deluge that turned the slick streets into black mirrors and the palm trees into weeping silhouettes. Inside La Sirena, the storm was a silent movie playing outside the panoramic windows. The restaurant itself was submerged, not in water, but in light. A deep, mesmerizing blue light radiated from the massive aquarium behind the bar, casting undulating, watery reflections that danced across the ceiling. It felt, to the wealthy patrons dining on expensive pasta, as if they were eating in a serene, underwater cavern. The illusion of peace shattered when the heavy glass door swung open. 3 men entered. They wore identical black raincoats, heavy wool that shed water onto the pristine marble floor. A busboy flinched at the mess. The maitre d' started to move toward them, a practiced smile forming. But he stopped. There was something wrong. Their steps were too dry, too measured, for men who had just come out of the downpour. Their hands were invisible. Tucked deep beneath the front flaps of their coats, they did not wait to be seated. In the elevated VIP room, separated from the main floor by a pane of frosted glass etched with mermaids, Nero Santori leaned forward. He was speaking in a low murmur to his accountant, a small, nervous man who was sweating despite the cool air. Nero was the opposite. He was the quietest power in the city, a man who ran the docks and the logistics of San Aurelio with the silent efficiency of a shark. The low thrum of the restaurant, the clinking of silver, was underscored by a pianist in the corner, his fingers gliding over an old jazz standard. Then the music hit a sour chord. The pianist froze, his hands hovering above the keys. One of the 3 men was moving, not toward the bar, but straight toward the VIP room. He was fast. He raised his hidden hand, and the weapon that emerged was not the polished steel one might expect. It was matte black, angular and dull, the telltale ridges of a 3-dimensional printed polymer catching the blue light. Bria Hale saw it all. Standing by the service station, polishing a wine glass, she had been tracking the 3 men since the door opened. Her eyes, framed by short, practical dark hair, were her defining feature. They were not the eyes of a waitress. They were the eyes of an analyst, a lens that absorbed, processed, and calculated every detail. She saw the man lunge, his shoulder hitting the frosted glass door of the VIP room, shoving it open with a crack. She saw the accountant throw his hands up. She saw the attacker ram his body weight into Nero Santori. The move was not a killing blow, it was a shove, designed to disorient, to knock the boss off his chair. Nero fell, and as he tumbled backward, his suit jacket flew open. His personal sidearm, a heavy silver pistol in a leather shoulder holster, was knocked loose. It flew free, tumbling end over end through the air in a perfect, terrible arc, suspended for a moment in the blue aquarium light. Bria did not hesitate. She did not scream. She moved. In a single, fluid motion that seemed to defy physics, she dropped the wine glass. As it fell, her body was already pivoting on the ball of her foot. Her left hand shot out, palm up, intercepting the flying pistol, her fingers instinctively closing around the grip, her thumb finding the safety. It was a perfect catch. Simultaneously, her right hand snatched a heavy ceramic coffee saucer from the service tray beside her. She did not aim. She threw... The saucer spun like a discus, cutting through the air and crashing with pinpoint accuracy into the trigger knuckle of the gunman, just as his finger tightened on the 3D printed weapon. The man's shot went wild. Instead of hitting Nero, the bullet exploded into a row of expensive liquor bottles above the bar. Glass and amber liquid rained down. Chaos erupted. Patrons screamed, diving under white tablecloths. Jonah Pike, Nero's head of security, materialized from the shadows near the VIP room. He was a mountain of a man, and he used his weight, tackling Nero low, pulling both of them in a controlled roll behind the solid oak of the bar. The air filled instantly with the sharp, herbal, anise-scented smell of spilled Amaro. Bria was already in command. She held Nero's gun with a two-handed grip. She did not aim at the men. She aimed up. 2 precise shots. The ornate crystal chandelier in the center of the room exploded in a shower of sparks and glass. The main dining room was plunged into controlled darkness. The only illumination now was the eerie blue glow from the tank and the red emergency signs. "Kitchen!" Bria's voice cut through the panic. It was not loud, but it was absolute. "Go to the kitchen door. Move now." The terrified diners, desperate for a leader, obeyed. They scrambled toward the back, a wave of fear pushing them to safety. The 3 attackers were momentarily blinded. They had planned for everything except the waitress. They stumbled over the expensive, upturned chairs. "He's gone," one of the men hissed, frantic. "The package is gone. Activate the hook. Activate it now." The third man, the one Bria had disarmed with the saucer, was fumbling in his pocket. Bria saw him pull out a small, metallic object. It looked less like electronics and more like a silver fish scale. Bria, tucking the heavy pistol under her arm, took 2 fast steps forward and kicked. Her foot, clad in a sensible black loafer, connected precisely with the man's wrist. The small device flew from his grasp and skittered across the marble, vanishing under a heavy booth. The darkness could not last, but it had lasted long enough. Jonah Pike emerged from behind the bar, a shadow moving within shadows. He was efficient and brutal. He used the chaos, closing the distance. He took down the first gunman at the knee, the second with a move that broke the man's collarbone. It was over in seconds. The third attacker, the one who had yelled about the hook, saw his partners fall. He scrambled backward, clawed the main door open, and vanished into the driving rain. He left 2 men writhing on the floor, and he left a burner phone, dropped in his haste. It lay screened down on the wet marble, a small, stylized sticker of a wolf's head gleaming in the blue light. The silence that fell was profound, broken only by the sound of the rain and the quiet sobbing of a patron. Nero Santori stood up. He slowly brushed shards of glass and spilled alcohol from the shoulders of his immaculate suit. He looked at the men on the floor, then at Jonah, who was already securing them with zip ties. His gaze passed over the terrified staff peering from the kitchen. Finally, his eyes locked on Bria. She was standing calmly by the service station, the heavy silver pistol in her hand. She had already ejected the magazine and was checking the chamber, making it safe. Nero walked toward her, his footsteps the only sound in the ruined restaurant. He stopped a few feet away, the air crackling between them. He looked at the gun in her hand, then at her steady, observant eyes. "Where?" Nero Santori asked, his voice a quiet rumble that carried all the weight of the city. "Did you learn that reflex?" The restaurant was no longer a serene cavern. It was a crime scene. The blue light of the aquarium was now corrupted by the rhythmic, intrusive flashes of red and blue from outside. La Sirena was officially closed. The last of the terrified patrons had been ushered out, and the kitchen staff had been sent home, their whispers echoing in the back halls. Only the core players remained, breathing in the smell of shattered glass, spilled Amaro, and the metallic tang of drying fear. Then came the new arrivals. They did not knock. The door opened to admit a woman and 2 men in dark, federal-style suits that seemed to repel the rain. The woman was in charge. She was in her 50s, with hair pulled into a severe bun and a smile that was a masterpiece of insincere muscle control. It did not touch her eyes, which were as cold and gray as the San Aurelio ocean in winter. "Nero," she said, her voice too bright, "you are making a terrible mess of my jurisdiction." This was Agnes Vale, head of the West Coast Integrity Commission, a fictional federal entity that poked its nose into everything from digital fraud to high-end organized crime. "Agnes." Nero Santori replied, his voice flat. He had a fresh glass of Amaro in his hand, procured from an unbroken bottle. "You got here fast." "We monitor interesting things." Her smile twitched. Her gaze slid past Nero, past the mountain of muscle that was Jonah Pike, and landed on Bria. "Who is this?" "Staff," Nero said. I'm the waitress, Bria added, her voice even. Agnes Vale's cold eyes catalogued her, the short hair, the steady hands, the blood spatter on her white apron that she had not yet bothered to wipe off. I see. Bria's own eyes were elsewhere. The burner phone, with its wolf head sticker, sat on the bar, bagged as evidence by Jonah. But before he had bagged it, its screen had lit up one last time, displaying a single, unnamed application icon. Bria had lied about her past. When Agnes asked for her statement, Bria gave her a version of the truth so scrubbed of detail it was functionally a lie. She was just a waitress. She saw men attack. She got lucky. Her voice was flat, her expression bored, a perfect mask of civilian shock. While Agnes turned back to Nero looked at Bria. A dry, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "You are hired," he said. Too quiet for Agnes to hear. "Tonight, double whatever you make." Bria did not look at him. She finished wiping down a clean section of the bar. "I just pour wine. Mr. Santori." It was Jonah who spoke, his voice a low rumble. He was looking at Bria's wrist, where her sleeve had ridden up during the fight, a pale, thin scar. A perfect circle, marked her skin. "That's a specialized zip-tie scar," he observed. Not to her, but to the room. The kind Leos use, or spec ops. Bria pulled her sleeve down. "Enough," Agnes snapped, her smile finally vanishing. "She was here for a reason. The men your man took down are Lupo Group assets. The one that got away is probably halfway to Mexico by now." Lupo Nero's interest was piqued. That was a new name in his world. "Cade Lupo," Agnes clarified, ticking points off on her fingers. "He runs a tech conglomerate out of Silicon Beach. Clean face, venture capital, smart appliances. The WIC believes his real business is data theft, blackmail. We call them data thieves. He's been trying to get his hooks into the port logistics for 6 months. This," she waved a hand at the wreckage, "was him trying to get your attention." Bria, ignored by the 3 power players, moved closer to the evidence bag on the bar. The phone screen was dark, but she had already seen the icon. And she had, with a movement so subtle no one saw it, held her own phone over the bag, her thumb tapping the camera button twice. A secret snapshot. Saved. She knew the icon, and she knew the name the attacker had yelled, "Hook!" It was a reverse pinging system. You did not track the device. You used the device to beacon a location. But why? Why use Nero's own gun? The question clicked into place with the terrifying certainty of a locked door. Why let Nero's gun fly? It was not a sloppy attack. It was the entire point. They did not come to kill him. They came to tag him. It was a setup. They had to knock the gun loose to plant the module. Bria interrupted the federal agent. "Jonah," she said. The big man turned, surprised she knew his name. "The boss's pistol," Bria said, pointing to where it lay, also in an evidence bag. "Let me see it. The grip plate. Take it off." Jonah looked at Nero. Nero nodded. With a small tool from a kit in his pocket, Jonah carefully opened the bag, retrieved the pistol, and, pressing a small latch, popped the custom grip plate off the handle. It was heavy, weighted for balance. And there, nestled in a newly milled cavity on the inside of the plate, was a thin, flexible circuit board. It was no bigger than a fingernail, black and anonymous, except for 2 letters and a symbol etched in copper. Hermes Am. Aegis Meridian, Bria's old company, the people who had built a prison for her. The room went silent. Agnes Vale leaned in, her eyes sharp, the fake smile gone, replaced by the hungry look of a predator. Nero Santori turned his head, his dark eyes locking on Bria. The casual, amused boss was gone. This was the man who ran the docks. You worked for them. It was not a question. Bria met his gaze, the lie she told Agnes now useless. "I was forced out," she said. The words were clipped, sharp and true. Agnes Vale's eyes flickered, just a tiny, micro expression. She had heard of Aegis Meridian, and now she had a link. She saw the connection between the waitress and the cryptic tech. "My investigation," Agnes said, reclaiming the room. This weapon is W. Wick evidence. It's my weapon, Nero countered. And she, he nodded at Bria, is my new consultant. He turned back to Bria. Ignoring the federal agent, he made the real offer, the one that mattered. 3 days, he said. That's how long I give you to find out why they tagged me. I will triple your monthly salary. Bria stood still. The rain lashed against the windows. Outside, the neon sign of La Sirena, a stylized, beautiful mermaid, flickered. Its blue and pink light spilled over the window, painting Bria's reflection. She stared at herself. No longer a waitress, but a ghost trapped in the glass, the neon sign bleeding over her face like a brand, the past pulling her back into the water. The apartment was high in Dockline, a sterile penthouse of glass and steel overlooking the container ships in the harbor. Bria had never lived here. It was a bolt hole, a relic from her old life, paid for by a shadow corporation that believed she was dead. She entered her own home like a burglar, dripping rainwater onto the polished concrete floor. She went straight to a panel by the empty fireplace, pressing a sequence that opened a hidden safe. Inside, there was a passport with a face that was not hers, stacks of currency, and a slim to metallic box. She opened the box. Lying on black velvet was a single key card. It was graphite gray, bearing the logo of Aegis Meridian. Bria reached for it, and her hand, the same hand that had caught a pistol in midair, began to tremble. It was not a slight shake. It was a violent, humiliating tremor. Her muscles seizing in memory, she cursed, grabbing her right wrist with her left hand, forcing it to be still, forcing her fingers to grasp the cold plastic. Her other phone, a burner she kept in the safe, buzzed. It was not a call. It was a message. She opened it. The text was from an anonymous, encrypted sender. Do not save him. Hermes needs a lure. Below the text was an image. It was a simple photograph, a time-stamped candid shot. A woman with Bria's eyes, looking older and tired, stood in front of a Desert Dawn gas station, a gallon of milk in her hand. Her mother. The timestamp was from 1 hour ago. The tremor in Bria's hand stopped, replaced by a cold, absolute stillness. The pieces were no longer just falling into place. They were snapping together like the mechanism of a trap. The attack on Nero was a delivery system. The goal was the Hermes tracker on his gun. The hook was a beacon. They were not trying to kill Nero. They were planning to harvest him, to draw him to a predetermined location for capture. And now they were using her mother as leverage, warning Bria to stand down and let it happen. They knew she was there. They knew she had seen the tracker. They were counting on her fear. A sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the empty apartment. Bria moved, the pistol she had taken from the safe's bottom layer now in her hand as she cleared the hallway. She looked through the peephole. It was Jonah Pike. She hesitated, then opened the door, keeping her body behind the steel frame. The big man did not try to enter. He stood in the hallway, his presence seeming to suck the air out of the space. He held 2 things. In one hand, a professional-grade medical bag. In the other, a small, awkward bouquet of flowers. They were not roses. They were proteas. Tough, prehistoric-looking blooms that were more armor than petal. He set both items on the floor just inside her doorway. He trusts no one. Jonah's voice was a deep bass, quiet but filling the hall. No one but me, but tonight. His eyes met hers. He trusts you. He turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy and final. Bria closed the door, her heart hammering a strange, unfamiliar rhythm. She looked at the flowers, then ignored them, opening the medical bag to treat the gash on her arm from the flying glass. She sat at the concrete table, the burner phone from the restaurant, the one she had photographed in front of her. She had the image. She pulled out a laptop from the safe, one that had never been connected to the internet, and began her real work. She worked offline, deep in the code she recognized as her own past, the app, the hook protocol. It was Aegis Meridian tech, but it was sloppy, rushed. They were arrogant. She found the activation schedule. The tracker was not constant, it was a burst transmitter, designed to save power and avoid detection. It sent out a location ping in a short, encrypted burst. Her eyes scanned the code. Ping schedule 2:17 a.m. Ping schedule 4:17 a.m. A 2-hour cycle. Then she found the final command, target lock. The signal would broadcast constantly, switching from a ping to a pull, guiding the intercept team in. The lock was scheduled for 6:17 in the morning. She had less than 9 hours. Bria made a decision. She could not run. They had her mother. She could not let them take Nero. They would kill him after they were done, and they would find her eventually. She had to break the trap by controlling the bait. She called Nero's personal number, the one Jonah had left at the bottom of the medical bag. When he arrived at the penthouse, she laid out the plan. It was audacious. They want a signal. We give them one, just not the one they expect. We use you as a lure, but we swap the real tracker. We put the Hermes device into a dummy gun, something 3D printed, loaded with a signal jammer. When they activate the hook for the final capture, we activate the jammer. It will overload their system with noise, and in the confusion, we hit them. Nero listened, his expression unreadable. He did not ask about her past or the technology. He only watched her, as if measuring her resolve. He agreed, but with one condition. If the plan fails, he said, his voice absolute. If they have me, don't hesitate. You shoot my phone. You destroy the comms. Understood. Bria looked at him. This man, this mafia boss, was willing to be the bait in a game he did not understand, trusting a woman he had just met, and she, a woman who had run from this life, was suggesting it. The air in the room was tight, a strange current passing between them, part suspicion, part cold calculation, and something else. A magnetic pull she could not name. She gave a single, sharp nod. The moment was broken by the low, mournful sound of a ship's horn echoing from the harbor, a warning from the deep, dark water. Miles away, in a black government sedan parked in the rain, Agnes Vale listened to a report from her surveillance team. They had tracked Bria to the dockline apartment. They had seen Nero Santori enter. The asset is in play, the agent reported. Agnes stared at the raindrops tracing paths down her windshield. She raised her own secure phone, not to her team, but to a number they did not know. Do not interfere, she ordered, her voice low and sharp. Let the lure swim. I need to know precisely where Hermes is going. The rooftop greenhouse at La Serena was a world removed from the wrecked restaurant below. It was Nero's private sanctuary, a humid, warm bubble of glass and steel where he grew exotic herbs for the kitchen. Tonight, it was a tactical operations center. The storm had not lessened. Rain hammered the glass panes, a frantic, percussive drumming that was both soothing and tense. Beyond the glass, the lights of San Aurelio were not stars. They were a glittering net, a city-sized trap waiting to be sprung. They sat at a simple potting table, side by side, the laptop between them. The screen cast a blue-white glow on their faces, more intimate than candlelight. Bria was tracking the Hermes device, which she had temporarily reinstalled in Nero's gun. The 2-hour pings were coming in precisely on schedule. 2:17 a.m., then 4:17 a.m. They were watching the second one, a silent blip on a dark map. It's stable, Bria murmured, her voice low. The battery draw is exactly to spec. They won't suspect a thing. The space between them, which had started as a professional courtesy, had shrunk over the hours. Their shoulders were almost touching. The shared danger, the isolation had compressed the air around them. Nero had shed his suit jacket hours ago, his shoulder holster, now empty, hung by the door. He wore only his white shirt, the collar open, the cuffs rolled back, revealing strong forearms. He looked less like a mafia boss and more like a man. One last thing, Bria said, her voice clinical, trying to keep it that way. She pulled a small, adhesive disc from her kit, a biometric sensor. I've linked this to the jammer. If your heart rate spikes a sudden firefight, a capture it will trigger the overload automatically. I need to place it over your pectoral, near the shoulder. Nero simply turned his body toward her, offering. Bria leaned in. She had to peel back the fine cotton of his shirt at the collar. Her fingers brushed his skin. It was not a clinical touch. The warmth of his body radiated through her fingertips, a sudden, living heat that felt more real than the cold data on the screen. She felt the steady, slow beat of his heart under her hand, a stark contrast to the hammering in her own chest. She pressed the sensor to his skin. There, she said, pulling her hand back too quickly. He did not pull his shirt back into place. He just watched her. You are very good at this, he said. It was a simple statement. I was, she replied, her eyes on the screen. A long time ago. The rain drummed. The silence was heavy, filled with the things they were not saying. He broke it first. I had a son, Nero said, his voice so quiet she almost missed it. He was not looking at her. He was looking out at the glittering, wet city. Angelo. He was 9. He had my temper in his mother's eyes. Bria stopped breathing. This was not a confession. It was a wound. It was a mistake, Nero continued, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, which was its own kind of emotion. A rival thought I had ordered a hit. I had not. But revenge does not wait for corrections. They hit his school transport, a mistake for a mistake. He paused. I have not trusted anyone with anything that matters since that day. Not really, not until tonight. Bria felt her own practiced defenses crack. He had not just shared information. He had given her a piece of his soul. She owed him the same. It was a data breach, she said, her own voice tight. At Aegis Meridian, I was a systems analyst. I found a vulnerability, a back door in a program they were selling to humanitarian groups. But the back door was not a flaw. It was the feature. They were not protecting data. They were stealing it. I reported it. And they fired you. He guessed. They tried to kill me, Bria corrected, her voice cold. They framed me for the breach, burned my identity, and sent a team to clean up. I have been a waitress, a barista, a ghost for 3 years. The air between them was electric. They were 2 different kinds of survivors, 2 people defined by the moment their lives had been stolen. A sudden, violent crack of thunder exploded directly overhead. It was so loud the glass of the greenhouse rattled in its steel frame. Simultaneously, the backup generator sputtered, the laptop screen, the small space heaters, the single bulb above them all flickered and died. They were plunged into absolute darkness, the only sound the violent roar of the rain. Bria, disoriented by the sudden blindness, stood up too fast. She stumbled on a coil of hosing, lurching forward into the void. She did not fall. He caught her. Nero was on his feet in the same instant, his hands finding her in the dark. He did not just steady her, he pulled her secure against him. One of his hands splayed across the small of her back, the other wrapping around her waist, holding her with an unbreakable strength. Bria's hands landed on his chest, feeling the solid muscle, the frantic beat of his heart under her palms, a heart that was no longer slow and steady. She could feel his breath, warm and smelling faintly of Amaro, on her temple. They stood like that for a second that stretched into an eternity. When the emergency power kicked back on, bathing them in a dim, red utility light, they were still holding each other. She looked up at him. His eyes, dark in the red light, were not looking at the computers. They were locked on her. It was not a conscious decision. It was instinct. It was the storm, the confession, the shared adrenaline. He lowered his head, and she met him halfway. The first contact was explosive, a collision of desperation and survival. It was hard, demanding, a kiss that said, I am alive. It was the taste of rain and Amaro and the metallic tang of fear. Then, just as quickly, it changed. It slowed. His hand moved from her waist to the back of her neck, his fingers lacing gently into her short hair, holding her, not forcing her. Her hand, which had been pressed flat against his chest, uncurled, her fingers sliding up to grip his shoulder. This second kiss was a choice. It was slow and deep and searching. It was a question and an answer. His lips were not rough, but firm, and they softened as he explored the line of her mouth. She parted her lips, and his tongue brushed hers, a hesitant, searing touch that sent a jolt straight to her core. Her back arched, pressing her closer to him, and a low sound vibrated in his chest, a sound that was half groan, half assent. They broke apart, but not far. They stopped just short, their foreheads pressing together. Their breath mingled, hot and ragged. They were both shaking. "Tomorrow morning, I could die," Bria whispered, the words a fragile truth in the small, warm space. "Today, live." Nero did not answer for a moment. Then, Bria felt the corner of his mouth curve into a faint smile against her skin. He did not kiss her again. He did something more intimate. He released his grip on her neck and leaned his head against her shoulder, a gesture of profound, weary trust, a silent promise that if they saw the dawn, the world would be different. Bria closed her eyes, allowing herself, for the first time in 3 years, to feel safe. Her eyes snapped open. Outside the glass, beyond the rain, a shadow moved. It was silent, a black shape against the black. Stormy sky, a quadrotor drone, running without lights. She did not move. She did not even breathe, willing her heart to slow, afraid it would trigger the sensor. But she knew. She recognized the subtle shimmer in the air around it. "Microwave spectrum scan," she breathed, her voice a cold sliver of ice. The moment was over. The enemy was no longer a future threat. They were here. They were locking in the coordinates. 5:50 a.m. The world was awash of cold gray and damp pavement. The storm had broken, leaving behind a nervous, pre-dawn chill that seeped into everything. The air smelled of salt and ozone. The operation moved in 3 silent parts, a trident aimed at the heart of the port. Nero Santori was the face. He climbed into his armored limousine, a visible, high-value target, his face a mask of calm. He was the lure, and he played the part, a king moving onto a chessboard. Jonah Pike was the muscle. He was behind the wheel of a refrigerated truck, the kind used to transport fish from the docks. The refrigeration unit was running, its loud hum providing cover for the high-powered Serena box in the back, a custom-built signal jammer and spoofer Bria had assembled from parts in Nero's workshop. Bria was the ghost. She was on a black electric motorcycle, her body clad in dark, armored gear, a full-face helmet masking her features. She was the one who held the real pieces of the plan. Before they left, in the alley behind La Serena, she had performed the final surgery. She had carefully extracted the tiny, shimmering Hermes YAM module from Nero's real pistol grip. In her other hand, she held a perfect replica, 3D printed from a dense polymer. It had the weight and feel of the real thing, but its internals were hollow. Inside this decoy, she nestled the Hermes module, but she added a second component, a small sleeper chip of her own design. It was wired directly to the Hermes device. When the final target lock signal was sent at 6:17, it would not just guide the enemy in, it would act as a trigger, waking Bria's chip. The chip would then hijack the Hermes broadcast, flooding the network with a data scream, a crippling burst of digital noise. She sealed the decoy gun. "This is what they want," she'd said to Nero. "Let's make sure they get it." Now they were all in motion. Bria's helmet display lit up. 6:10 a.m. The enemy's network was active. The hook signal, the one that had been pulsing every 2 hours, suddenly became a solid, unwavering line. It was no longer a ping, it was a pull. Bria watched her digital map as the vector resolved, pulling them away from the city center and down toward the industrial sprawl of Mission Point. The limousine's GPS, hijacked by the same signal, directed Nero's driver. "Go!" Nero had ordered. The destination was exactly what Bria expected, a desolate, forgotten corner of the port, Warehouse 7, a chain-link fence, rusting in the sea air, a vast, open yard filled with shipping containers stacked like building blocks. The signal was pulling them to a specific point, a narrow alleyway between two towering stacks of containers, both painted with the same stylized, menacing wolf's head logo, a perfect kill box. Miles back, seated in her black sedan, Agnes Vale watched her own monitor, 3 dots Nero, Jonah, and the unknown Bria converging on the warehouse. "Maintain a 3-block perimeter," Agnes ordered. "No one moves in. I want Lupo. I want to see his face when the trap springs." Bria parked her bike in the shadows, her eyes on the narrow alley. Nero's limousine pulled to a stop at the entrance. Jonah parked the reefer truck, blocking the only other exit. 6:16 a.m.? "They're early," Bria murmured, her hand on the decoy pistol at her hip. A high-pitched whine, barely audible, cut through the air. From the darkness above the containers, 4 drones descended. They were large, industrial, and fast, their red running lights like angry eyes. They were not armed with weapons. They were armed with heavy-duty magnetic clamps. They swarmed the limousine, their lights flashing, their magnets clearly searching. They were here for the gun. "Now, Jonah," Bria spoke into her comm. In the cab of the reefer truck, Jonah flipped a red switch. The Sirena box roared to life. On Bria's console, the signal map exploded. The single, clean hook signal was instantly drowned in a sea of false data. Jonah was not just jamming, he was spoofing, creating 3 new, identical hook signals, all broadcasting from different points within the warehouse yard. The drones faltered, their logic was fractured. 2 of them zoomed off toward a stack of empty pallets. 1 veered hard left, slamming into a container. Lupo's forces, watching through the drone's cameras, were suddenly blind, their single target now 3. Only 1 drone remained, hovering over the limo, its logic circuit struggling. "Nero, now," Bria commanded. The limousine door opened. Nero Santori stepped out, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. He took 2 steps, then, as if his ankle had turned, he stumbled, lurching forward and falling to 1 knee. It was the perfect distraction. Bria moved in one fluid motion. She drew the 3D-printed decoy gun, her eyes tracking the hovering drone. She was not a waitress. She was not a ghost. She was an operator. She threw the gun, not at the drone, but under it in a perfect, calculated arc. The drone's proximity sensors screamed, its magnetic clamp, sensing the metal components inside the decoy, activated with a loud thunk. The magnet latched onto the gun in midair, snatching it like a fish leaping for a lure. "Got it," Bria said, a cold smile of triumph touching her lips. At precisely 6:17 a.m., the sleeper chip inside the decoy woke up. Bria's laptop, strapped to her motorcycle, was monitoring the flood. It was working. The data stream was overwhelming the network. She watched the code cascade, a waterfall of garbage data designed to fry their systems. And then she saw it. Buried within the garbage, a single, separate ping. It was not part of the Hermes network. It was a secondary handshake, an authorization query. It was a digital signature. It was her own, her old Aegis Meridian employee ID, an alphanumeric string she had not seen in 3 years, a code that was supposed to be dead, burned, and buried. Someone was using her credentials. Someone was logged into the Lupo network as her... The realization hit her like a physical blow, colder and harder than the morning air. They were not here for Nero. He was never the target. He was just the bait. They were here for her. The attack on the restaurant, the Hermes device, the hook. It was all an intricate, expensive breadcrumb trail, laid by someone who knew her, someone who knew she would see the Hermes code, that she would get involved, that she would lead them. Where? To the person who had leaked the Solstice data 3 years ago. The plan was not to capture Nero, it was to capture her. Her entire strategy, her clever countermove, was nothing. She had just walked herself, and Nero, into the real trap. Bria's mind raced, calculating, discarding 1,000 failed options. There was only one move left. The decoy was no longer the bait. She was... "Bria, what is it?" Nero's voice was in her ear. He was on his feet, his real gun now in his hand. Bria switched off the Serena box. The digital noise stopped. She looked up at the container stacks, at the hidden cameras she knew were watching. "Change of plans," she said, her voice impossibly calm, her blood turning to ice. "I am surrendering. Do not, under any circumstances, interfere." She dropped her helmet. She unclipped her own sidearm and let it fall to the pavement. She stepped out of the shadows into the center of the kill box and raised her hands. The warehouse yard was silent. Bria stood in the open, her hands raised, her short hair ruffled by the damp sea breeze. She had deliberately turned her face toward the small, dark lens of a camera she had spotted nestled in the corner of a container. She was no longer a ghost. She was an asset, presenting herself for collection. A harsh static buzz broke the silence, and then a voice, synthesized and amplified, boomed from speakers hidden among the containers. "We meet again. Bria, or should I say, we finally meet." A massive flat-screen panel, built into the side of the container bearing the wolf head logo, flickered to life. The face that appeared was not that of a thug. It was a man in a crisp gray suit, with a friendly, open smile. Like a tech CEO about to launch a new product, this was Cade Lupo. "I am a fan of your work, Bria," he said, his voice oozing an unsettling, corporate friendliness. "The Solstice Fire, a masterpiece of digital misdirection. You've been very, very expensive to find." "I am here now," Bria said, her voice flat. She was doing more than talking. She was observing. Her eyes tracked a subtle flicker in the corner of her vision, a ground-penetrating radar sweep, pulsing, then pausing. She began counting. 1, 2, 3. It was a 15-second cycle, a gap, just long enough for the system to reboot, just long enough for someone to move undetected. "Indeed you are," Lupo smiled. "And just in time, we have a proposition. You are a ghost, a non-entity. I can fix that. I can give you your life back, a clean slate, new papers. Your mother is safe. All of it. All you have to do is one small thing for me. Sell me Nero Centauri." He gestured to the limousine. "Give me his codes, his roots, his real business. You have his ear. He trusts you. He's old world. Bria, you and I, we are the future." Bria kept her face a perfect mask of cold consideration. She was feeding Jonah the information through her comms, her jaw barely moving. 15-second sweep cycle. He's blind between pulses. Northwest corner. "Bria, do not listen to him." Nero's voice suddenly cut through the comms, and then, shockingly, he switched to the open channel, broadcasting from the limousine's external speaker. "Lupo, the deal is not with her. It is with me." Bria's eyes flashed, her control breaking for a fraction of a second. "No, Nero, don't. Trade me for her." Nero's voice boomed across the yard. "She's just a consultant. I am the prize. Let her walk, and I will come with you. My word." Cade Lupo's friendly mask faltered. He looked genuinely surprised, and then delighted. He laughed. "Oh, Mr. Centauri, you have made a terrible mistake. You have just shown your hand. You have an attachment, a weakness." Lupo's image was replaced by another. It was the photo of Bria's mother standing in front of the Desert Dawn gas station, the gallon of milk in her hand, her face weary. "She's a lovely woman, Bria." Lupo's voice was back, all friendliness gone, replaced by a cold, surgical precision. "She's currently at this gas station. I have a team, a retrieval team, just 2 minutes away. If you, or Mr. Centauri, or his large friend in the truck, make one move I do not like, I will push a button. I will send her location, and they will collect her. Do you understand what collect means, Bria?" Bria's heart seized. The air left her lungs. The world tilted, the stacks of containers seeming to lean in on her. This was the knife to the throat. But the fear, so cold and absolute, sharpened her. It burned away everything but the fight. Her voice, when she spoke, was not panicked. It was as cold and sharp as Lupo's. "You're afraid," Bria said. Lupo paused. What? You're more afraid of me than you are of him, Bria said, her gaze fixed on the camera lens. You did not build this entire multi-million-dollar trap just to get Nero Santori. You built it to find me, which means you are desperate. She took a small, calculated step forward. You were still bleeding from the Solstice data center fire. That was last year. You never found the hard leak. You never found the person who walked out with your client list, your blackmail files. You just found me. Bria played her only card. I have the last log, the final, uncorrupted server log from before the fire, the one that proves what you were doing, the one you failed to destroy. The smile was gone from Cade Lupo's face. The man in the suit vanished, and the predator emerged. His knuckles, resting on his desk, were white. You are lying! Am I? Bria said. Why else would I be alive? I am the only one who can decrypt it. Lupo was breathing hard, his corporate mask shattered by pure, unadulterated rage. He had lost control, and he knew it. He had exposed his motive. Give me the log, Bria, he snarled, all pretense gone. Give me the log, and I will return your mother. It was a confession. Miles away, Agnes Vale sat in her sedan, her finger on the record button. She smiled, a real smile this time, thin and sharp. That's it, she whispered to her partner. That's the confession, indirect, but it ties him to Solstice. It's enough for a federal warrant. Her partner moved to make the call, but Agnes put a hand on his arm. Not yet. He did not say, mother. He said, return. He's trafficking her. The log is the key to his data network, but the mother is part of his other business. I want the whole chain. Let the fish run. I want the ocean. In the yard, Bria pressed her advantage. I'm not giving you anything over a screen. You want the log, you want me. You meet me face to face. Here, now, Lupo demanded. No, Bria said. Not your house. My terms, the old Elmar warehouse, the one by the sea. It is a dead zone. No signal. We meet there. In 1 hour. Just you, just me. You bring my mother, unharmed. I bring the log. You will make the trade. Lupo hesitated, his mind visibly calculating. Bria knew something he did not. The Elmar warehouse was not a dead zone. It was a wick black site, a place so saturated with hidden, parallel channel cameras and microphones that not even Aegis Meridian could hack it. It was Agnes Vale's personal spider web. 1 hour, Cade, Bria said, or I burn the log, and I burn you with it, won't ye? Lupo's image stared at her, his eyes full of murder. Then the screen went black. He will come, Bria said into her comm. Finally letting out a breath. He's not the only one, Nero's voice replied, the sound of his limousine's engine rumbling to life. Bria, he hurt you. He used your mother. We are going to end this. The temporary operations room was the old manager's office in the back of La Sirena, a place that smelled of aged leather, cigar smoke, and now, sharp antiseptic. Bria sat on the edge of a heavy mahogany desk, her jacket and tactical gear stripped off, leaving her in a thin black shirt. The gash on her shoulder from the warehouse was deeper than she thought, a long, angry tear from a ricochet. Nero stood in front of her, his own suit jacket gone. The room was too small, making his presence, his focused energy, overwhelming. He was working under the harsh light of a desk lamp. His hands, which she expected to be rough, moved with a startling, practiced delicacy. He was not clumsy. This was the work of a man who had survived, who had patched himself up more times than he could count. He had disinfected the wound. Now, he was closing it. Bria inhaled sharply, her whole body tensing as the surgical needle, thin and curved, pierced her skin for the first stitch. A small sound of pain escaped her, a sound she despised. I am sorry. Nero's voice was a low rumble, his eyes fixed on his work. Almost done. His breath brushed her skin, and they were breathing the same air, a mix of antiseptic and their own proximity. The air thrummed. Bria watched his hands, the controlled strength in his fingers as he pulled the thread taut. When he finished the last stitch, He did not immediately pull away. He paused, his hand still hovering over her shoulder. He looked at the fresh stitches, then at her face. He saw the pain she was trying to hide. Slowly, almost reverently, he lifted her left hand, his thumb brushed over her knuckles, the ones she had used to brace herself. He turned her hand over, his gaze tracing the lines of her palm. Then, he lowered his head and pressed his lips to the back of her hand, a soft, warm kiss that was a stark contrast to the violence they had just escaped. It was not a gesture of passion, it was an apology, a sign of respect, a silent acknowledgement that he had put her in harm's way. Bria's breath caught. Her heart, which had been hammering with adrenaline, now hammered for a different reason. She looked at him, and he looked back. The space between them was electric, a world of questions and answers passing without a single word. His eyes dropped to her mouth. She did not pull away. He leaned in, slow, giving her every chance to retreat. She did not. Their lips met. It was not the desperate, frantic collision from the greenhouse. This was slow. It was a question, his mouth gently brushing hers, asking, her lips parting slightly. Were the answer? It was a search, a discovery, a quiet exploration in the middle of a war. It was the taste of Amaro on his breath, the salt from her skin, the metallic tang of the blood they had shared. His hand, the one that was not holding hers, came up to cup her face. His thumb stroked her jawline. Bria's own hand, the one he had just kissed, rose to grip his shirt, her fingers curling into the fine cotton. He deepened the kiss, and a fire, low and dangerous, began to build, threatening to consume them both. Then Nero felt her wince, a tiny, involuntary stiffening of her body as her shoulder protested the movement. He pulled back instantly, his forehead rested against hers, but his eyes were filled with a sudden, dark self-loathing. He had hurt her. "I don't want to cause you more pain," he whispered, the words rough. He had misunderstood her pain. Bria looked at him, at this powerful, dangerous man who had stopped a kiss because he thought he was hurting her, and in that moment, her last wall of defense crumbled. She took his hand, the one that had just sutured her skin, the one that had just cupped her face, and pulled it to her chest. She pressed his palm flat against her sternum, directly over her heart. She held it there, forcing him to feel the steady, strong rhythm beneath. "Here," Bria whispered, her voice no longer cold, no longer the detached operator. It was just her. Nero's eyes closed. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding since his son died. He did not pull her into a bruising embrace. He simply leaned in, resting his weight against her, his head bowing to rest in the curve of her neck. Bria wrapped her good arm around him, holding him. They just stood there. Two survivors. Two broken pieces. Finally. Briefly. At peace. They were not lovers. Not yet. They were something more profound. They were allies, anchored in the storm. And when they finally, slowly, pulled apart, their eyes met, and they were both smiling, not a full smile, but a shared, secret understanding. The moment was shattered by a beep. Bria's head snapped toward the laptop. The screen, which had been dark, now showed a flashing red dot. "She's moving," Bria said, all warmth gone, her voice returning to the cold precision of the operator. The trace on her mother's location was active. Lupo is updating her position every 40 minutes. He's squeezing the timeline. A heavy knock, and Jonah Pike entered. He did not look at the intimate scene he had clearly interrupted. He was all business. He spread a large nautical chart across the mahogany desk, pushing aside the medical supplies. "I found her," Jonah said, his thick finger tapping a point of latitude and longitude out in the dark water past the harbor. "Your mother is not on land. Lupo's signal is bouncing. But the transport matrix, the one Lupo uses for his high-value cargo, it all converges on this." He tapped the name on the chart, Mariana Dawn. "It is a research vessel," Bria said, recognizing the type. "A-Farm," Jonah rumbled, a floating lab. Lupo uses it to move product and people outside of WAC jurisdiction. The clock was ticking. The rendezvous at El Mar was in less than an hour. Nero turned from the chart. He walked to a heavy, old-world safe behind a painting of the Italian coast. He spun the dial, his movements precise, and opened it. He did not take out a gun or money. He took out a single ornate brass key, tied to a leather fob. He pressed it into Bria's hand, his fingers closing hers around it. "This is the key to the Santori vault," he said, his voice low and absolute. "It is under the old church on Hill Street. If I die tonight, Jonah will take you there, everything in it. It is enough to buy an army. It will be enough to save your mother." He was giving her his kingdom, his entire legacy. He was placing his trust, his life's work, in her hands. Bria's fingers tightened on the key. She looked at him, her eyes as hard and bright as steel. "If you die, I'm dragging him down with me," she replied, her voice a deadly promise. They stared at each other. One last, long look, breathing the same air, their purpose aligned. From the hallway, a grandfather clock chimed the hour. It was time. The door to the office was open, and for the first time that night, the sharp, clean smell of the sea, the smell of the El Mar warehouse, flooded the room, calling them to the final fight. The El Mar warehouse smelled of rust, dead salt, and old fish. It was a cavernous, empty shell, its corrugated metal walls echoing the sound of the surf crashing just 100 feet away. Bria walked into the center of the vast, dusty floor alone. The only light came from the gray morning sky, filtering through the grime-caked skylights. She was not unarmed. She wore a standard wire, but her real weapon was invisible, a smart retinal contact lens, which streamed a high-definition feed of everything she saw directly to a secure Wix server. Headlights cut through the gloom. A black, windowless van and 2 matching SUVs crunched to a stop on the gravel outside. The doors slid open, and Cade Lupo stepped out, not in his pristine gray suit, but in tactical black gear. He was flanked by 2 teams of guards, 6 men in total, all wearing pristine white, armored gloves, Lupo's personal white glove unit. They fanned out, their movements precise, securing the perimeter. "Bria!" Lupo's voice, no longer amplified, was tight with anger. "The log! Now! Where is my mother?" "Verification first," Bria said, her hand going to her pocket. She held up a single, black USB drive. "You first, Cade." Simultaneously, 20 miles away, Jonah Pike moved like a boulder in the shadows of Mission Point. He was at the pier, looking at the Mariana Dawn. The ship was a high-tech research vessel, its white paint gleaming, its decks cluttered with scientific equipment that was all a front. He watched the crew making ready to sail. He had one small, limpet-like device in his hand, an acoustic beacon. He dropped from the pier into the cold water without a splash, a black-clad shadow swimming beneath the hull. He found the rudder housing, pressed the device into place, and its magnetic clamp engaged with a muted click. When that device was activated, it would send out a high-frequency distress ping, a signal that the Pacific Cross-Border Authority, a fictional agency with very real patrol boats, was legally required to intercept as a maritime emergency. On the other side of the county, Nero Santori's SUV screeched to a halt at the Desert Dawn gas station. The place was desolate, its pumps rusting, the windows boarded up. He and 2 of his men cleared the building in 30 seconds. It was empty. "Boss," one of his men called from the back room, "you need to see this." Nero walked in. There was no hostage. There was no sign of a struggle. There was only a small, battery-powered signal spoofer, blinking a green light, broadcasting a fake location. Lupo had never had Bria's mother here at all. It was another digital ghost. Taped to the top of the device was a single, folded piece of paper, a handwritten note. Nero picked it up. The handwriting was neat, feminine. It contained only 4 words. "Bria, don't trust anyone." Nero stared at it, the blood running cold in his veins. This was not Lupo's move. This was something else. Back at El Mar, Cade Lupo's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His face, already pale with anger, turned to chalk. The Desert Dawn team had just reported finding Nero's men. The trap had been discovered. "It's a setup," Lupo snarled, his eyes wild with panic and rage, snapping to Bria. "You were stalling." "No," Bria yelled, but the white-gloved guards were already moving, converging on her. "Get her!" Lupo screamed. "Get her in the van now!" "Wait, the log!" Bria shouted, pretending to panic. She fumbled. Dropping the USB drive, it skittered across the concrete floor. One of the guards scooped it up. "It's a fake," Lupo yelled. "Check it!" Bria screamed, desperate. "Check it! It's the only copy!" The guard, confused, looked at Lupo. Lupo hesitated, his greed warring with his panic. "Check it," he ordered. The guard jammed the USB into a handheld data pad. The screen lit up. For a second, nothing happened. Then the data bomb deployed. It was not an explosion. It was a worm. It burrowed into Lupo's secure network and hit the execute command on a single hidden file, the one that contained his entire encrypted log of criminal activity. The worm's only other command was to upload that file, now, to the anonymous, Wiki-controlled server Agnes Vale had waiting. In her sedan, Agnes's laptop chimed. "We've got it," she whispered, her eyes glittering. "The whole ledger, we've got him." Her team leader moved to give the signal. "Move in." "No," Agnes said. In the warehouse, Bria was being dragged toward the van. She caught sight of the hidden WIC camera, the one she knew Agnes was monitoring. As the guards shoved her, Bria shook her head, a tiny, frantic, "No, no, no," that looked like fear. But it was a signal. "Not yet." Agnes saw it. "Stand down, she's saying no. Why is she saying no?" Bria's retinal lens was still transmitting. She forced her eye to look at the Mariana Dawn logo on the side of Lupo's van. She blinked a message in Morse code, one she knew they would log, SHIP. "The ship." Agnes breathed. "She's right. We have the data, but we don't have the trafficking. It's not enough. We need the people on that ship." Bria was thrown toward the black van, the one with the thick signal-blocking panels. As she was shoved inside, she faked a stumble, her body lurching against the metal frame of the passenger seat. Her hand, the one holding the Santori key, jammed down into the gap between the seat and the console. She left a tiny, metallic object, no bigger than a rice grain, wedged deep in the upholstery, a micro-tracker. The heavy door slammed shut, plunging her into darkness. The van was a Faraday cage. She was blind. Her comms were dead. The van's engine roared to life. At the port, the Mariana Dawn's massive engines thrummed, and the ship began to pull away from the pier. Jonah Pike, swimming back to the shadows, pulled himself into a small, high-speed interceptor boat hidden in a nearby slip. He turned the key, its twin engines firing with a low growl. On the highway, Nero Santori's SUV, tires smoking, executed a perfect 180 turn, spraying gravel. He was racing back to the coast, his phone to his ear. "Bria, talk to me, Bria." The line was dead. He slammed his hand on the dashboard. He opened the comm to Jonah. "She's dark. He has her. Keep him talking. Bria," he yelled, a desperate, impossible order to a woman who could not hear him. The inside of the signal-blocking van was a coffin of steel and darkness. Bria sat in the cargo hold, her hands bound, her world reduced to the rumble of the tires and the sway of the vehicle. A single guard sat opposite her, but he was irrelevant. She was calculating. She was listening. In the front passenger seat, Cade Lupo was on a call, a screen, invisible to Bria but casting a cold, flickering light, had come to life. "We have the asset," Lupo said, his voice tense. "The log file was a data bomb, but the network is purging. We are moving to the rendezvous." A voice replied. It was female, filtered through a heavy synthesizer, yet it carried an unmistakable chill of absolute authority. "The asset is secondary. Cade, the primary objective is compromised." "What primary objective?" Lupo snapped. "The target was Santori." "The target," the voice said, and Bria heard the click of a secure connection, the logo of a stylized, thorny bee flashing on the screen, just visible in the reflection on the dividing glass, was always Agnes Vale. You were a tool. Cade, your entire Lupo group, a tool. Aegis Meridian, Hermes, all of it. We are black letter. We do not steal data. We launder people. We erase witnesses. We build new identities. And Agnes Vale, she dismantled our Lisbon network 3 years ago. She got lucky. The voice, designated Madam Quill on Cade's screen, was cold fire. This entire operation, this elaborate, expensive hunt, was to draw Vale into the open. Centauri was the bait for the girl. The girl was the bait for Agnes. In the darkness, Bria's blood turned to ice. She was a pawn. Nero was a pawn. But something clicked, a final, terrible piece of logic. The note, the handwritten note at the Desert Dawn gas station. Bria, don't trust anyone. She had seen that handwriting before. She had seen it on an evidence bag at La Serena. She had seen it scrawled on a tactical map. It was Agnes Vale's sharp, precise script. It was not a threat from her mother. It was a warning from Agnes. In her sedan, miles away, Agnes Vale was listening to the same open channel. She had been tracking her own bug, the one she had planted in the note. She heard Madame Quill's voice, and her face was a mask of grim triumph. "It's her," Agnes whispered. "We lost the retinal feed," her team lead hissed. "The van is a Faraday cage. We have to move in. Vale, whose operation is this?" "Mine," Agnes said, her voice a razor. "I had to push them. I had to let them think they were hunting me, to force Quill to show her hand. Bria was the only one who could get this close." Nero Centauri, barreling down the freeway, heard Agnes's admission over the comm channel he was monitoring. He heard Quill. He heard Bria. He heard bait. He did not rage. His hands did not tighten on the wheel. He simply processed, his mind going terrifyingly cold and clear. The board had changed. He was silent for 2 seconds. Then he hit his comm. "Jonah. New target. A woman. Madam Quill. Agnes is hunting her. We hunt them both. Bria is in that van. Find her." Jonah's voice was a low growl. "On it, boss." His high-speed interceptor boat was a shadow, cutting through the chop of the main channel, closing on the stern of the Mariana Dawn. The ship was moving faster now, heading for open water. "They're running. I'm forcing the stop." He flipped the cover on a small device. He pressed the red button. Miles away, at the PCBA command center, alarms blared. "Maritime emergency ping. Sector 4. Vessel Mariana Dawn. That is a priority. 1 distress signal. All cutters. Intercept. That vessel is legally required to stop and prepare for boarding." The captain of the Mariana Dawn got the call and cursed, his engine slowing, the fake emergency trapping him in a net of international law. Inside the van, Bria felt the vehicle accelerate, then bank hard onto a long, sweeping ramp. She knew this route. The shoreline bridge. They were crossing the canal, 40 feet above the water. The guard in the hold with her was bored, arrogant. He was texting, his weapon resting on his knee. Bria acted. She slammed her body weight to the left as the van swayed, knocking the guard off balance. As he grunted, she brought her bound feet up, smashing her heels into his knee. The joint buckled. He reached for his gun, but she was faster. Twisting, catching his wrist, she did not hesitate. She used her full body, leveraging her weight against the joint, and a wet, heavy snap echoed in the small space. The guard screamed. Bria lunged for the red emergency latch on the rear door. She slammed her shoulder into it. The door flew open. "Stop her!" Cade screamed from the front seat. Bria did not pause. She dove, rolling out of the back of the moving van. She hit the asphalt of the bridge, her shoulder screaming, and rolled. Once. Twice. Over the low railing and into the black, empty air. She hit the cold canal water, the shock of it stealing her breath. She surfaced, gasping. From the black shadow of a bridge pylon, a boat engine roared to life. Jonah Pike's interceptor slid from the darkness, his massive hand grabbing the back of her vest, hauling her from the water in one single, powerful motion. On the bridge, The black van screeched to a halt. Cade Lupo looked over the edge, saw the speedboat disappearing into the night. He roared, an animal sound of pure, unadulterated rage. His SUVs, which had been following, pulled up. Get them, go. A new set of headlights appeared, Nero's armored SUV coming from the other direction, barreling against traffic, its engine a war cry. It was a game of Chicken Nero intended to win. He did not slow down. He aimed for the lead SUV and accelerated. Stop, stop, Cade screamed. Nero hit them. The sound was an explosion of shattering glass and shearing metal. Nero's reinforced vehicle acted like a battering ram, spinning the lead SUV into the second, creating a wall of twisted wreckage. The bridge was blocked. Cade Lupo jumped from the useless van. He was not a fighter. He was a runner. He scrambled over the wreckage. A civilian tour helicopter, white and unmarked, suddenly dropped from the sky. Hovering feet above the road, the side door was open. Lupo did not wait. He ran, jumped, and grabbed the landing skid. The helicopter pulled him in, banked hard over the city, and vanished. Nero stood by his steaming, wrecked SUV. He'd lost Lupo. His comm beeped. It was Agnes Vale. I have lost him, Nero growled. Forget Lupo. He's irrelevant. Agnes's voice was sharp, electric. The tracker, the one I put in the note. It is live. She's not running. She is at a villa, a dark villa on the Elmar coast. She's waiting for me. Agnes's voice was tight with a predator's joy. It is time to unmask Madame Quill. The wind at the Elmar pier was no longer a whisper. It was a raw, howling gale, tearing at the dark waters. Bria and Nero did not pause at the door of the dark villa. Nero, in one fluid, powerful motion, kicked it from its hinges. They moved inside, a two-person team, clearing the dark, expansive room. The only light came from a massive bank of monitors, casting a sterile blue glow on a single figure. She stood not by the computers, but by a floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the storm. I was wondering when you would get here, the voice said. The figure turned, and the light hit her face. It was Agnes Vale. She was wearing a black tactical suit, not the drab federal attire Bria knew. And she was smiling, the same cold, insincere smile that Bria remembered from La Serena. You two are smart, Agnes said, her voice smooth, all pretense of the clipped federal agent gone. But you are one step behind. Madame Quill, Nero stated. It was not a question. You, Bria whispered, and the single word was filled with the ice of betrayal. Me, Agnes confirmed, walking toward them, her confidence absolute. This entire elaborate campaign. It was never just about Lupo. It was about you, Mr. Santori, cutting the head off the old world mafia. And it was about you, Lupo, handing me the keys to the new world data market. I set the board, and I let you two wolves eat each other. She stopped, her gaze falling on Bria, her smile now laced with something like pity. And you, Bria, I used your mother, yes. I exploited that raw, open wound because I needed you angry. I needed you sharp. I needed you to lead me to the solstice leak. I was even trying to push you back home. Aegis Meridian. It is just the laundry service for Black Letter. I was giving you a chance to rejoin the winning team. You use my mother as a lure, Bria said, her voice trembling with a controlled, lethal rage. She was my insurance, Agnes shrugged. And you, Bria, you failed to see the real trap. No, Bria said, her voice suddenly flat, cold and victorious. You did. Agnes's smile faltered. When your man, Bria continued, the one in the white gloves, jammed that USB into his datapad, he did not just trigger the upload I wanted you to see. He created a handshake. He authenticated my old credentials. Bria's hand, hidden in her pocket, was gripping a small, identical USB drive. This one was a transmitter. It is a reverse data bomb. Agnes, I am not stealing your data. I am forcing every machine in this villa, every server you are connected to sync with my Solstice drive. And it is not a log. It is a global broadcast backdoor. Bria clicked the activation switch. Outside, The night exploded, not in violence, but in justice. On the Mariana Dawn, the PCBA boarding team, escalating their search, breached the main cargo hold. They did not find medical supplies. They found steel cages, holding cells, filled with terrified, ghost-like people. And next to them, rows of cold storage data servers. Cade Lupo's entire, monstrous enterprise, human trafficking and data theft, two sides of the same coin. The helicopter Lupo had escaped in, a civilian model, attempted to land on a private beach, a powerful maritime jamming signal, activated by the PCBA, fried its avionics. The chopper dropped, heavy and uncontrolled, crashing onto the wet sand. Cade Lupo, dazed and unbroken, was surrounded. In the villa, Agnes's monitors lit up, not with data, but with 1,000 red error messages. Her network was collapsing. Her face, for the first time, twisted in pure animal panic. "You!" she screamed, her eyes finding Bria. She saw her enemy. She drew her sidearm, not aiming at Bria, but at Nero. She fired. Bria did not hesitate. She grabbed a heavy wooden door that had been knocked loose, using it as a shield. The bullet thudded into the thick oak. Bria advanced, slamming the door into Agnes, using it as a ram, pinning her against the wall. She dropped the shield, grabbed Agnes's gun hand, and twisted, a sharp, precise shoulder lock, a move designed to break, not to kill. Agnes screamed in pain. Nero was there, not with a gun, but with a zip tie. He yanked her one good arm back and cinched the plastic tight. Bria walked to the open comms panel, the one Agnes had used to broadcast her power. Bria hit the open channel key. The entire confession, Agnes, every word. It is all going out. Live. Agnes Quill's face, her voice, her admission was suddenly blasting across every public news feed, every police scanner. The Black Letter Network, built on shadows, was dragged, kicking and screaming, into the light, and it fractured. "Bria," a weak voice called from the shadows. A hidden panel, a section of the bookshelf, slid open. Bria's mother stood there, pale, shaking, but alive. Agnes's insurance policy. Bria ran to her, the first tears she had allowed herself in 3 years, cutting paths through the grime on her face. Her mother grabbed her, holding her tight. Her voice, though trembling, was hard as steel. "I knew you would find me." Later, after the sirens, after the arrests, the villa was quiet, awash in the revolving red and blue lights of the PCBA cutters on the water. Bria and Nero stood on the pier, the wind still cold, but the storm was over. He stood beside her, his presence a solid, warm anchor in the chaos. He turned to her, his hand coming up, his thumb gently brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. He leaned in, and the kiss was long and slow and held none of the desperation of their past encounters. It was a promise. It was a choice. His other hand rested on the small of her back, the curve of her spine, pulling her fractionally closer. He pulled back, his forehead resting against hers, their breath mingling in the cold night air. "From now on, I choose the light and I choose you," he whispered, the words almost stolen by the wind. The West Coast Integrity Commission, exposed as a shell for Madame Quill, dissolved overnight. Bria was offered jobs, from shadow agencies wanting her skills, from legitimate ones wanting her name. She refused them all. She accepted Nero's. He was liquidating his old world assets, forming Santori Coastworks, a clean, legitimate logistics and development corporation. Bria became its head of security. La Serena reopened, not as a mafia den, but as a true community space, a safe harbor. Jonah, in his spare time, began teaching free self-defense classes in the back room, the victims from the Mariana Dawn, their identities stolen by Blackletter, were given new ones and jobs by the Santori Coastworks. It was a Tuesday, a busy evening service. The sound of a piano, light and clear, filled the room. A drunk patron at the bar, laughing too loudly, knocked his whiskey glass from the bar top. Nero, standing nearby, instinctively reached for it, but his hand closed on empty air. Bria, standing beside him, had already caught it. Her reflexes, a perfect, fluid motion, had intercepted the glass an inch before it hit the floor. She looked at him, a small smile playing on her lips. He smiled back, a real smile, one that reached his eyes. They both knew. This time, the hook had anchored them, not to a trap, but to a new life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment below, say hello, and share your thoughts. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button to help this story reach more people.